Hello everyone and welcome to our second episode of Mark's Side of the Ring, the wrestling podcast for wrestling fans, by wrestling fans. Before I start, because I meant to do this at the start of episode 1, I just want to give a shout out to Sixth Sense, who provided the music for Mark's Side of the Ring. If you're a fan of bands like Stuck Mojo and The Agonist, they're a great independent metal band, trying to bring new metal back as well. And I mean, to be fair, if you're a fan of wrestling, you've had plenty of new metal in your time, let's face it. So they've got, I'm just going to quickly plug them before we dive in. They've got 2 EPs out. So we've got Kings Today and Fools Tomorrow. Both absolutely fantastic. Go and check them out. I was lucky enough to interview them, the 2 lead singers last year. And absolutely awesome band. So that's the cheap plug out of the way. We've got Peter, Robbie and Kev here with us once again. How you doing, guys?
Yeah. Good.
Really good.
Lovely. So this is a bit of an impromptu. I mean, the first one we thought went really well. I think a lot of people didn't realise, that's the first time that the 4 of us have got together on a call and chatted about wrestling. But it seemed to come out quite naturally. It was really nice. And we thought, right, we'll do it again next week. And then the wrestling world seemed to explode a bit. So we were like, right, we need to get out there quickly and talk about some of these releases and all of this kind of stuff that's going on. So we've got a pretty jam-packed show today. I think we're being very careful. We want to try not to make it too downbeat because, again, what we're talking about here are people losing their jobs, which is really shitty. And, hopefully we can, celebrate some cool careers. I know Peter had an awesome idea that our topic, the back end of the show, is going to be about our favourite returns. I think that's going to be really cool. And just the other stuff that's going on, we'll touch on the AEW Grand Slam stuff and all sorts. But because there is so much to cover, I think, I start to think at the top of the show, it might be quite good to almost do a little bit of a bit of a news summary, a little bit of kind of what's going on. So I'm going to try this, but I'm going to try and do it like a proper news bulletin. I think you're going to appreciate the music, right? So let's give it a go, see if it works. Here is what's going on in wrestling, right now. That's not it. That's Sixth Sense. Here we go.
Proper news.
It's been a busy week for WWE in these initial weeks under new ownership, as well as many office workers losing their jobs following the Endeavour takeover. News began to filter out at the weekend across social media as many WWE and NXT stars announced they'd been let go by the company. Notable names announcing their departure from WWE include 2-time World Heavyweight Champion Dolph Ziggler, Matt Riddle, and former 24/7 champ Dana Brooke. We'll, of course, be talking loads more about that later in the show. Elsewhere, kind of in WWE land at the moment, despite the releases, WWE continues to go from strength to strength, announcing a new deal with February for Fox, and that February's Elimination Chamber PLE will be live from Perth, Australia. As I said, their USA network has signed a deal to lure SmackDown away from Fox. That's leaving Raw and NXT essentially without a home in the new year. Amazon and Disney are apparently interested. And, obviously we'll just have to wait and see kind of what happens in the new year with regards to that. One thing that is interesting is that it wouldn't be off the table for Raw to move from its traditional Monday night slot, which I think for a lot of wrestling fans would be absolute sacrilege. But of course, AEW were pretty busy too. We had AEW Grand Slam. 2 parts of it. So there was Dynamite and Rampage emanating from Arthur Ashe Stadium. Collision, I think, was in Michigan, about an hour's drive for Rob Van Dam, with stacked cards. World champion MJF and women's champion Saraya successfully defending their championships respectively, but loads of title changes. Of course, if you're a wrestling fan, you're into that sort of thing. We've got Eddie Kingston winning the Ring of Honor championship. We've got Christian Cage, which I just watched this morning. Christian Cage becoming TNT champion, and of course, and I think this is where we're going to go with first. Quite an unexpected win for Rey Fenix over Jon Moxley, ensuring that we had a new AEW International Champion. Now, like I say, I think this is kind of where we're going to start. Again, we'll talk about the releases and stuff shortly. we were talking about what an important week it is for AEW, an important week for kind of, Grand Slam and this, that, and the other. And this was one of the anticipated matches, I think. Who's got a chance to catch Dynamite yet?
Yeah, I caught up, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen it.
So, because again, just for context for anyone who's not listening in the outside of the UK, that, if you've got Fight, obviously you can watch it live, but otherwise I think Dynamite airs on like a Saturday night or something here or Friday night, something like that in the UK. So sometimes it takes us a bit of a while to be able to get to see the show, but I've got the pass with Fight TV, so I'll be able to catch it earlier on in the week. Obviously, Rey Fenix, I love the Lucha Brothers, probably one of, if not my favourite tag team in wrestling at the moment. Rey Fenix getting a shot with Jon Moxley for the international title. Early on in the match, Mox gets what's been called a mild concussion, which, I don't know how I feel about that terminology, but I guess I'm not an in-ring competitor. Leading to a very awkward end to the match where obviously Phoenix does a move, referee goes to count, and then just stops shy of the 3. Arthur Ashe Stadium showering with booze, and they do it again. Moxley's called an audible because of the concussion that Phoenix walks out with the title. So obviously I've read quite a bit about this soon, but what were your initial thoughts watching it? Like, we'll start with you, Peter. Like, what were your initial thoughts kind of watching the finish of the match?
I enjoyed that. I mean, obviously, like a lot of people, I kind of saw the finish before the actual match itself. And watched the match, enjoyed it. Good match, very enjoyable. It's trying to work out when he actually got the concussion, and it kind of ties into, well, if he got it early on, a lot of people suggesting that he got it from the dive that Phoenix did, and he did pretty much. He certainly whiplashed his head when he landed. If he did it then, or was it from that kind of Rikishi style driver that he took at the end for the pin? And obviously the plan wasn't for Phoenix to win, and he called the audible. So when was the audible called? And I think that's ultimately the confusing thing. So, I mean, when Mox got hit with that first drive, he looked like that actually did him. He looked like he was flat out. So maybe that wasn't when he got it, but maybe that kind of knocked him a little bit more. And, you kind of feel for the ref, but apparently they did it in a lot of places long before it was kind of made a big deal of, was that all referees are always kind of taught and told to count the pinfall as a shoot. Whether that's been lost or whether it was just a bit of panic, who knows. The good thing seems to be that Mox is okay. He left on his own. He's a tough guy, sometimes to his detriment. I think the guy needs a break, bless him. But enjoyed the match. This finish is a shame about it, but I don't think long term it'll do too much damage. I think they'll sharp recover from it, I think.
Do you think? I mean, it was after Brawl Out, wasn't it? That was when Mox was like, "I was going to have a vacation," and he's still not had one yet. So maybe you'll get one.
But how good was that promo?
Oh yeah.
Because I remember watching that, and I've got a wrestling group chat with some of my other friends, and sometimes the group name changes depending on whatever. And I think I watched that morning, I was still outside work like 6 o'clock, and I watched it, I was like, wow. And I literally changed the group's name to Jon Moxley is my hero. And it's been like that. It's been like that for the last year. No one's changed it, so nothing significant is happening enough to knock Jon Moxley off the perch. So
there you go. I mean, when you touched on a really good point there, that I was gonna ask a little bit about. Like, certainly in WWE, it's very much this thing, like you said, that the matches, as far as the referees are concerned, that pinfalls are counted as a shoot. So that's actually led to some kind of amusing things before, where people have won championships when they shouldn't have, and all of this kind of stuff. I mean, the AEW referees, they do get a bit of shit sometimes, particularly like tag team matches. People say that they maybe don't enforce the rules enough, all this kind of stuff. I mean, do you think that's a fair complaint, Robbie? Like, do you think that there could be some work to be done for the AEW refs, or do you think that's just people looking a bit too deeply into it and we should just be enjoying the matches?
Generally think there's people looking a bit too much into it. If you're watching a main event as a fan, especially if you're there, you don't want it to end on kind of a technicality. So, maybe just let a few things slide. I mean, if it's a good match and no one's really going to be bothered, I'm not. If it's a good match and someone gets put through a table and the ref doesn't DQ it, I'm not bothered because I'm viewing a good match.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think it's stuff like enforcing the rules in tag team matches and all this sort of thing. But I think to myself, like at the end of the day, we're telling a story, and like you say, if kind of bending those rules a little bit or just giving it a bit of license. Like I know sometimes the commentators, particularly for title matches, like you say, will say things like, "Oh, the referee's being lenient because they don't want this to end on the DQ" and all this kind of stuff. And like I think that makes the world of sense. Do you know what I mean? I mean, like I said, I was pleasantly, obviously, glad that Mox is okay, but pleasantly surprised that Rey Fenix won the championship. I mean, Kev, what do you make of Rey Fenix? Do you think that he'll be a long-term champion? Do you think that creative plans will shift and they'll kind of pivot back to Orange Cassidy or even Moxley if he's okay?
Yeah, I think they'll put it back on Moxley. I think he'll be a transitional champion at most. I think just going on like with the ref again. See, I'm not sure how AEW's gorilla position works. Like, I'm not sure if they have like a person, if the ref's got an earpiece and someone's telling them to say, "Oh," because unless the ref has to make that decision on the fly, because the finisher, like, I didn't understand like why the ref made him like his shoulders went on the mat. And then it made him pick him up and do it again. Like, if the ref knew he was injured, I think it was a bit irresponsible that he was going to make him do if the first finisher was the one that injured him, it's slightly irresponsible to make him do it again to cause further damage to him. So, I mean, that's what...
Yeah, this is my thing that again, and I'm like you, Peter. Like I'm not entirely sure where it happened. Like stuff you read says early in the match, so that would imply that maybe it wasn't the driver. But then obviously we don't know. It certainly wouldn't have helped matters. But I guess it makes me think a little bit like. I mean, obviously, there's a time you think Kurt Angle SummerSlam 2000, he can barely remember any of it because he had his bell absolutely clocked. But then things have changed a lot now. We know much more about concussions and the impact they can have on our brain and all this kind of stuff. And I guess it makes me think, and I think you hit the nail on the head, Peter. Like, I think Mox is like a tough bastard, but to his detriment sometimes. And I wonder if maybe if he was aware that he had a concussion, as much as maybe it wouldn't have been the popular decision, maybe they find a way to stop the match, like end it on a DQ or something like that to kind of spare him a little bit.
Well, I mean, his safety should come first.
Again, Kev's totally right. Safety's got to come first, and I think we're seeing more and more of that across the board, and certainly in the main promotions as well, and rightly so. And I think the thing again with the Mox thing is like no one really knows. I haven't seen it stated very clearly from anybody that when it kind of happened. I don't think we're going to know until maybe Moxley speaks on it himself. And Kev's right, when that finish happened, he hits him with a driver and then, well, I'm going to go and do it again. That's the thing that is concerning, because if surely it was communicated before and that he's had his bell rung. But I hate using that phrase, but it's the one that's brought to mind.
Yeah.
And that's the shame. And, and apparently from what I've also read, that the ref caught a lot of heat backstage for that one as well. I think they've all got headphones. I'm sure I've seen like Aubrey with an earpiece in as well. I think it's a lot of it's to do with timing cues more than just kind of anything else between the ring crew. So, it's a shame it's happened. But like I said, Mox is all right. Hopefully he gets all right, and we'll see what happens with Rey Fenix if they do some of the form of a creative shift short term. We'll kind of see. I mean, there's no shortage of matches for Phoenix to have with the guys on the roster. Maybe to go back to Mox and just have a quick thing, and Mox just goes back in and obliterates him for dinging his head and ringing the bell, and that we'll see what happens, and then get back on track to where they were initially thinking of going with Moxley, and something might tell us somewhere down the line it might be a rematch with Orange Cassidy.
Yeah. Before we move on from kind of the AEW talk, but I guess this kind of leans more into concussion talk for a clumsy segue, really. And obviously we were talking about 1,000 episodes of Impact. Gail Kim was obviously involved in a match involving some of the knockouts, and there's been some kind of heat online because Velvet Sky, there'd been a spot where Velvet Sky had kind of pulled Gail out of the ring. Gail had got a concussion, and a lot of people online jumping on Velvet Sky. I imagine there's possibly, I haven't seen it, but I imagine there's possibly people jumping on Ray as well in terms of kind of the concussion for Mox. And I think it's, Gail Kim had come out with this really kind of supportive statement on behalf of Velvet, basically being like, this is part of the job. This is what happens. And, she didn't do anything wrong. And, I won't tolerate you kind of abusing her online like that. To be fair, that's very much the kind of thing that we're, with this podcast, trying to get away from. Do you know what I mean? This idea of like, tribalism and being like abusive to wrestlers on Twitter and all of this kind of stuff. I mean, do you think, is that something that's quite difficult in terms of, in terms of the sport of wrestling, and do we think that sometimes, like we say, accidents happen, and do we think that sometimes that fans can overstep a little bit in terms of kind of making their opinions known about that kind of thing?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I mean, we watch the matches. We're not trained. Mm-hmm. How can we make comment on something we don't actually know how to do it?
Yeah.
So it just, to jump on them for something we have no clue about is just, to me, just sound daft.
Yeah. And I guess the main thing for both Gail Kim and Mox is that they're okay. Do you know what I mean? Like that's the number one thing. And obviously, I imagine, and we're not blaming either of them, but I imagine that Ray Phoenix and Velvet Sky probably do feel quite shit that happened in their match. Do you know what I mean? It's like all the crap that Ridge Holland gets for being involved in that spot with Big E. Do you know what I mean? And Big E is like the last person who's going to rip him about that. Like, I think it's just about time to say, well, look, that's it's really really unfortunate that it's happened this way. But like you say, we're just along for the ride. Like, these are the guys that they know when someone's being reckless or shooting, and they know when there's just an unfortunate accident, which is kind of two instances of it this week.
But at the end of the day, I mean, I'm by no means a trained wrestler. I went to a wrestling school for a couple of weeks, and from the basics, I mean, there's so much to do when you're in the ring. You don't even realize, like, from you've got to make sure you're constantly in view of the crowd, and it's everything to remember. And like, you can make a mistake now and again, and it's just sometimes there's a botch and it happens. It's because like you can't be perfect, and I think fans jump on wrestlers too much. I mean, most of them wrestlers, like, they've wrestled, like Big John Moxley, he's wrestled most of his adult life, and the other ones, and you will make a mistake now and again. There's so much more into wrestling and just like the moves. Like, you've got to remember a lot of things in the ring, and it's exhausting as well. Like, it's so exhausting, like, wrestling. People don't realize. So yeah, we can give them some slack now and again.
And now, obviously, kind of the main reason that we've kind of logged on tonight and done this, really, just to talk about these releases from WWE. And I mean, to be fair, for years now, this has been quite a common thing that, there's usually a time of year where they kind of do a bit of spring cleaning, to put it crudely, kind of get rid of a few of their wrestlers and that kind of thing. Obviously, as soon as the takeover had happened with Endeavour and TKO Group was formed, we were talking a little bit last time about some of the office staff, being made redundant and this sort of thing. And then it was literally, I think, I'd put the episode 1 online, and then all this stuff started filtering out about these wrestlers that have been released. So I'm just going to run through the list, and then obviously we can pick some out, and we can obviously have a bit of a chat about them. So obviously, I think the big one, which I'm sure that we will be talking about, obviously Dolph Ziggler is out. Elias, Mustafa Ali, Shelton Benjamin, Top Dollar. Obviously, I think Top Dollar had posted some stuff today, about his release. Riddick Moss, Emma, Aaliyah, Rick Boogs. So I think they're all the main roster, with the exception of one that happened the next day, which we'll get to shortly. Quincy Elliott, Bryson Montana, Dana Brooke, Mansoor and Mace, Shanky, Babatunde, aka Commander Aziz, Yelisa Leon, Daniel MacArthur, Kevin Ventura Cortez, Alexis Gray, Brooklyn Barlow, Hikimenjiro, Abule Abade Fitzgerald, and then the next day it was announced that Matt Riddle had also kind of lost his contract. So some big names on there. I think sometimes when they do these, I think the one around COVID, there were some massive names in that one. Were there any that took you by surprise, Robbie? Were there any names that you wouldn't have expected to see released, or did that feel, if they were going to release anyone, that these were the acts that we're going to go for?
Dolph Ziggler, for me. To put it mildly, I think it's bullshit what they've done to him. He's been there for that long. He had to pull off that cheerleader gimmick, which wouldn't have been easy for anybody. Sold everybody's moves. You thought they were real, and then just to say, "Nah, we don't need you anymore." A year before the 2 decades, they could have just let him have that 20-year special, and then right there you go, on you go. But I just think the way they've done it with Ziggler is just disgusting in my eyes.
I mean, I remember thinking, and I don't know if it was this year's Rumble or maybe last year's Rumble, but there was something along the lines of that he had the chance to have appeared in the most consecutive Royal Rumbles. And I just thought, even if he just comes in and you kick him out straight away or whatever you want to do, why wouldn't you do that? Like, records are made to be broken. Do you know what I mean? I think it's Kane's got it at the moment, or at least Glenn Jacobs in kind of different forms, so might be Rikishi. But yeah, and I just thought, what a shame. Do you know what I mean? And then more so here, like you say, that, you know, I mean, let's say, because I found a graphic before my phone, I'm just going to bring it up. And this has got like all of his accomplishments on. So he was, as we'd said, 2-time World Heavyweight Champion, former NXT Champion, which wasn't that long ago, to be perfectly honest, 6-time Intercontinental Champion, 2-time United States Champion, 4-time Tag Team Champion, former Money in the Bank, one of my favourite cash-ins as well, incidentally, Dolph Ziggler. And then, so he had 1,554 TV matches for the WWE, which it says in this graphic was the third most in WWE history. I've read the second most in other places as well. Either way, a prolific WWE career. He's almost certainly going in the Hall of Fame.
He's like
I kind of get what you mean.
He's the modern day Shawn Michaels, I always think. When I see him and see him wrestle, it's like he's the Shawn Michaels of this era. Like when Shawn Michaels was in his prime, that's how I think of Dolph Ziggler, and it is really disrespectful what they've done.
Do you think? I mean, like the past few years have been very quiet for him. He's had some like amazing. I mean, to be fair, like reading through those accomplishments, he's had some amazing moments. Like, do you think that? Because I know there were kind of periods where, you know, he kind of alluded that maybe he was unhappy or he was considering going, or his mind was elsewhere. Do you think he was maybe a bit underappreciated, particularly in the last few years?
Yeah, big time. I mean, that stat of 2 world champions to me is shocking in itself. You know, he should have more than that. Yeah, it just didn't sit right with us when I heard it was Dolph Ziggler going.
And it's like I say, I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about Dolph Ziggler moments in like shortly, but like that Money in the Bank cash in is easily top 3. And I think it's the Money in the Bank gimmick's one that I think they've oversaturated a little bit, and I'm sure we'll talk about that over time. But like that cash in, there's very few that I would put above it, and the reaction kind of when he came out with AJ and Big E to cash that in was absolutely massive. I mean, we were talking there about like, oh, well, you could give him another year, and I hate the saying, but it's really in vogue at the moment. Like, give him his flowers. Do you know what I mean? Do you think we could have done more than that, Peter? Like, do you think WWE, like, perhaps if the right people were interested, kind of with the new ownership, like, do you think that he could have had like quite an epic little final run, perhaps?
I think he could have done, and I think there's still enough well wishes in good faith in general with the fan base that it wouldn't take much to get people up for it. He's still incredible in the ring. He hasn't really slowed down too much, despite obviously he's past 40 now and in the neck end of a 20-year career just on TV pretty much. So he still can go. There's no two ways about that. I think that the best way to put it is, my friend asked this, he says, are you going to tell us what you think? You put on the comment on the Facebook post. I says, no, you're going to have to listen later on when you go on. And what I did say was, I do think that it got to a point where they took him for granted. He was so good. He could have a match. He became this yardstick that if you can't have a match with him, you're not going to be good enough, because he can have a match with anyone. And obviously his 2 world heavyweight title reigns, one was just kind of more of a gimmick thing of a storyline thing. It didn't really mean anything, but it was a kind of, oh, well, maybe. And then obviously the cash in, and he's running hard leading up to that from Money in the Bank onwards, the little feud with Cena and all at the TLC, the way the crowd went in. A lot of people forget how nuts the crowd went for that when he climbed the ladder to kind of keep the briefcase. They went insane for that. They were chanting from all the way through Mania 29. And I still remember recording Raw the night after on the Sky DVR and repeatedly watching that bit just to keep listening to the pop when the music hit. And it's one of the biggest pops it's ever been. And I'm not even going to say, oh, well, it was a Mania crowd. That would have been the same if it had been any Monday. Everyone was behind him. He had a chance again in 2016 to really kick on, and they just didn't do it for whatever reason. And I think if AEW had been around 2 or 3 years earlier, I think he might have been given a run. I think they went, he's not really going to go anywhere else, is he? And I think that's been the case of it. Obviously, they weren't going to release him 4 years ago because they don't want someone who's been on TV that long to go to AEW fresh. So a massive case of what if, but I think everybody knows what the what if would have been. And hopefully he stays in wrestling for a little bit longer so people really can give him his flowers, I guess. And too often we don't get a chance to do that. So hopefully we really do in the next year or so.
But this is the thing. I mean, his brother's over in AEW now. So it kind of seems like the next logical step for Ziggler. I don't know, mate. Hopefully, I don't put him in a tag team with his brother. They just give him a singles push and a singles run. I think that'll benefit Ziggler a lot.
Yeah, and I think in terms of because I know obviously there's the running jokers, and every time someone's released, there's a meme of Tony Khan with a checkbook and all this kind of stuff. But the AEW fans would welcome Ziggler with open arms. You know, they absolutely would. And again, the potential matches are, really exciting. Do you know what I mean? Like some of the guys that are on the roster already who could have matches with him, even some of the less obvious ones. Like I've the past year, I've always liked Orange Cassidy, but really, I think he's had a phenomenal year. I think a match with Ziggler and Cassidy, put a title on there, like the national title or something, fantastic match to open a pay-per-view. I think it would be absolutely phenomenal. So I think it'll either be that or a stand-up comedy. I think that, obviously he's been doing that for a while. Sounds like he enjoys it. He's good at it. So he might think, you know what? I'm just going to do that for a while. Maybe do the conventions, that kind of thing. Or hopefully he might think, right, tell you what, let's have a nice run in AEW. You might be kind of looking over, seeing, some of the other people over there and those dream matches that we're talking about.
I think what would be quite interesting, aside from necessarily going straight to AEW, I think what would be really interesting, what would do good for a lot of places, is maybe him and Cardona having a run feuding across the indies.
Yeah,
I think would draw a lot of eyes to a lot of different promotions, create some buzz, and gives both a chance to kind of certainly see does he still want to kind of stay in it, or just go out and have fun, work with these different places, different people, guys he's seen. Does he get a chance to work with an Ospreay or an Orange Cassidy if he goes to AEW? I think would be invaluable at AEW as well, because he works such a really fast pace. I think he'd be able to teach those guys who work that pace as well a lot in terms of everyone tells you to slow down, but this is where you slow down for it. And I think having someone who can work that quick in that style, but give these guys the knowledge of going, and all the old timers say slow down, but this is what we're talking about. We're not talking about how quick you move. It's the spaces in between that. I don't think they've had really anybody to teach them that who understands how they work. They've had a lot of veterans to be able to tell them that, but I don't think they've had anyone who understands how they work to tell them that. And I think that's a key difference.
So if we say number one Dolph Ziggler moment in his WWE career, what are we saying?
The cash in.
Yeah.
I'm in agreement with that. Anyone else?
It's got to be the cash in. I think a close second would be the performance at Survivor Series 2014.
Oh, yeah. And the Intercontinental title match with The Miz.
Yeah, you could argue that's the top three, and I don't think you'd have much argument from anybody if which one you wanted to place at the top, to be fair.
Yeah. But I mean, hell of a career. Best of luck to him, and hopefully we do. We're talking about AEW, and that makes sense. Even like Impact, you know what I mean? I think he'd fit in. He'd be main event player in Impact straight away. So hopefully we'll see him somewhere, and kind of fingers crossed that we get that opportunity to see him end his career with a flourish. Obviously, we talked a little bit there, later than the other releases. Obviously they announced a big handful of them, and it was trickling through as well, wasn't it? It was like, I think I finished work, and it was like I was picking up my daughter, and I was making the tea and all this stuff, and I'd keep checking and be like, oh, someone else has gone. And I think what's interesting for me is that, so usually, because I made a bit of a joke about the phrasing of this, obviously they've been taken over by Endeavour, and it would usually be WWE saying, we'll wish them all the best in their future endeavours. As far as I know, please correct me if I'm wrong, I've not heard anything from the WWE camp. It's all been from the superstars announced on social media that they've been released, which is quite a turnaround. I mean, other than the awful joke that I've tried to make there, is there any other reason we can think of that maybe the company is staying tight-lipped on this, and it's the wrestlers themselves that are coming forward and saying that they're available and that their contracts are up?
I think it just stems from they've kind of learned the hard way from the backlash. And obviously, business is business, and sometimes these things happen. And I've been in redundancy situations, and it absolutely sucks. And it sucks for these guys. And I think they caught so much flack for, listen, this big press release, and so-and-so's not with us, so-and-so's not with us. And I think now, and obviously there's been quite a significant change in talent relations, if you know what I mean. And so I think that they're given a phone call, and it's on them to kind of let the world know rather than because I think putting a press release out to say that you let go is in bad taste all around. It doesn't benefit anybody. It doesn't benefit the company. Doesn't benefit the wrestlers. If I was to lose my job being made redundant, I wouldn't want the company I work for telling my family. I know it's not the same, but you know what I mean? It's like, I don't want the world telling everyone I've been made redundant. I'd rather say, look, I'm no longer there, and I'll see you all soon. So I think that's probably a bit of a reason why, bit of a PR, but hopefully a bit more human approach to it than sticking it out on the internet and let the guys do it themselves.
Yeah. So, like I say, they were filtering out through the day, and then the next day it seemed like all had gone quiet, and then the next day it was Matt Riddle that was announced that he was gone. And I know me and Pete were just talking about this while we were waiting for you two guys before we hit record. And I think what I'd said, and this is, I'm casting no aspersions on the guy. Clearly there's some difficult stuff going on for him at the moment. He's kind of put in some accusations of an incident that's happened in an airport. However, controversy seems to have followed him around throughout his WWE and NXT career. And part of me wondered because, again, the company's been part of this big takeover. I know that Dana White famously has quite an issue with Matt Riddle. Obviously, UFC are very much part of the deal. It almost feels in some ways like it wasn't a big surprise, but at the same time, I think maybe with the gap and all this kind of stuff, and just how until very recently he'd been a big part of TV, I think it did come as a bit of a surprise. I mean, Kev, what are your thoughts on Riddle's departure? Do you think that's a missed opportunity?
Definitely, and I definitely think Endeavour's had their way of getting him out the door, because I think the chances that he's had with WWE to stay in, they've wanted to keep hold of him, where I think other wrestlers would have been released before that. I think obviously with the beef he's had with Dana White and stuff and the UFC, I think they've definitely had some in this, because I mean, when they put Matt Riddle with Randy Orton and stuff, so they were really keen on him to get him over, and he was. I mean, I remember seeing him come into NXT, because I don't really follow UFC, so I just thought at first it was like a MMA gimmick. I didn't realize that he was from the UFC, but I mean, I really liked him in NXT, and then when he came up to WWE, he had the obligatory name change to Riddle, which really annoyed me. But I think he could have been they could have pushed him. He could have been WWE champion. I think, like, from watching him in NXT, I think he could have been a top star. I think it's definitely a waste opportunity. But again, it's like whether it was his personal his personal demons that kept him down as well. Like, I've heard it's been quite problematic in the locker room and stuff, which doesn't help. I think it's just a really big shame because I was really keen on him when I first saw him in NXT, and I thought he was going to be like the next big star. So I'm quite gutted that he's been released now as well.
And I think the Arcade Road team works, and it shouldn't have done really when you think about the two people part of it, but like it just seemed to. But I think odd couple tag teams sometimes can do really well. I mean, for me, like I enjoyed him. Like he wasn't kind of in my top 10 or anything like that, but I enjoyed him. I think what I liked to see more, and I think I was talking about this on the Facebook group. So for anyone who's listening, wants to join in the chat, we've got a great Facebook group, Mark's Side of the Ring. Obviously, we're streaming the episode live. Seems to be working all right. I checked before while we were talking. But like I say, we'll be streaming the episodes live and just great wrestling chat and just all kinds of stuff, and you can get involved and that sort of thing. And Ad says that for me, I think the moment that I'll probably remember him for in the most positive light was the feud with Seth Rollins. Particularly this kind of like sit down interview, where it was the two of them sort of via satellite, if you like, and it was as if the cameras had cut, and Seth started jibing him about kind of his real life breakdown of his relationship, and you just saw this intensity in Riddle, and he was like, "What did you say? Right, I'm going to get you," and all this, and I was like, "That's the Riddle I want to see." Like, again, the comedy stuff was fun, but like there was something about that, and then obviously the match they had after was great as well. I mean, Robert, do you think that? Do you agree with Kev? Do you think that he could have been a WWE champion, or did he have the skills? I guess is what I'm asking to be WWE champion.
Yeah, it's not my first choice of who I would want to be the top champion. I think the partnership with Orton really got him over, and I just think since Orton was out injured, they just kind of had nothing for him really. They put him in a little bit part feud with Solo Sikoa, and then just attached him onto Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens, and then Drew McIntyre. So they were just hopping in from tag team to tag team. I just don't think anything really stuck. It wasn't a massive shock that he had went, but big player to go. And again, AEW, they would, I'm sure they snap him up.
Yeah, I mean, what do you reckon, Pete? Do you think that's a shout for him? Do you think we'll see him on TBS or TNT? For America, for us, it's ITV4, isn't it?
Yeah. I think at some point, yes, if he manages, I guess, without knowing anything, he's managed to kind of keep himself in a good place, and like you say, leave whatever drama he's got with him behind, and maybe he's looked at what is going on and around him, and you can only go so far if you've got bad people around you that are going to bring you down. So hopefully he can first and foremost get that's part of his life right, and then if the opportunity presents itself at AEW, I'm sure Tony Khan would be interested if things are right. But he'd get work, and he'd get work anyway. To be fair, he's more of a name than he was before.
Yeah,
who knows? He may go back into mixed martial arts. Obviously not the UFC, but there's plenty of other avenues for him to kind of go and explore and see what he can do. So it will be interesting to see what he does, and I think a lot of it is actually in his hands to find out what happens. So we'll see.
So I think what's a pretty good thing to do at this point, like we'll all take a turn and kind of pick out a name that we haven't discussed that kind of stood out for us in terms of the releases. I guess for myself, if you're happy for me to jump in first, I think for me it was, and this might be obviously there was some bigger names than this person that was released, but I think the one that stood out for me, one, because of the timing of it, and I think two, because of the absolute lost potential kind of in this second run, was Emma, kind of Tennille Dashwood. Like, I think for me, if we think back to the NXT days, obviously she was a big part of the start of that NXT Women's Championship. She's a very, very capable wrestler. I think there's nothing really, and this isn't me kind of digging at her at all, nothing really of note in this second run. That you know, she came back and you know they paired her up with Riddick Moss, who she's kind of with in real life, and kind of sort of alluded to that they were in a relationship, but didn't really take it anywhere. And then, bless her, they announced, which we're going to talk about shortly, they announced that they're going to do a massive stadium show in Australia. So she posts a thing on Twitter being like, "This is amazing. Hopefully I'll get to perform in this stadium." Oh, no, sorry, lads, I've been sacked. And I really felt for her, because I felt like, if you're going to do that, maybe speak to her first. Don't get her hopes up that she's going to be able to wrestle. I mean, obviously, like, we'll talk about it. It'll be a massive homecoming for Rhea Ripley for certain, but like it could have been for Emma as well. And I think for me, she is someone that they really, you know, if we're talking, and I'm a big advocate of kind of the Triple H era and a lot of the people he brought back, but I think he really dropped the ball with Emma the second time round. I mean, Peter, what are your thoughts? Like, do you feel, you know, do you think that Emma's someone that they could have done more with? Is she someone that, you know, you particularly watch and enjoy?
A lot of early stuff, obviously, when she came on as Emma and she had like the bubbles gimmick, I guess, was a thing. But you know, you go back to the match she had with Paige in NXT, which made some people go, "Oh, they're letting the girls actually wrestle." Oh, that was cool. And she showed she can go in the ring. And the kind of the character she had with like the Aviator Shades type of thing, she was showing the side of her, and I think could have done something more with it. But I think I think it's an attention span thing. Whoever's looking at that women's division, they've got the attention span for maybe 4 or 5 at the most.
Mm-hmm.
And then everyone else is just to fill the numbers in. Obviously, not everyone can get on TV, and it goes for the men as well. But, you know, it's if you didn't really have any plans for it other than just depth, then from a business point of view, you've just wasted money.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a slight on her. It's like, yes, she's being paid, but I'm pretty sure she'd rather be wrestling. So, and to find out, oh, we're going to Perth, and then like a couple of hours later, and the tweet was like, oh, never mind.
Yeah.
And it's like, it is heartbreaking, because there's no other way to put it. I must be absolutely devastating, and I genuinely feel for her on that level. And, you know, but I don't think it's a case of drop the ball. Was one I never understood in the first place. And I was like, well, I don't know. You've got so many that you're not doing with anyway. Why? And for me, I think they've just wasted the money and took her off the market almost for the sake of doing it.
Yeah. And I think this is it. I mean, I feel like I think she maybe had like a run between the two runs. I think, did she end up in Impact for a bit? I'm sure that's where she was.
Yeah.
And like, again, really good fit for her. I think she would do well in AEW. I think she'd do better at Ring of Honor. I feel that the Ring of Honor women's division is awesome. And I think that she would fit in really nicely there. But yeah, I think it's just a shame. I think more that, like you say, the way that the second run's gone down, and the fact that, you know, she's not really been used to that potential when, like you say, she could have been storming it on the indies or for another company. Like, you know, loads of opportunity there. And then obviously our partner getting released on the same day as well, which must have sucked. And to be fair, there were massive plans for him. I'd say maybe this time last year when they'd kind of brought him away from Baron Corbin, or Happy Corbin as he was at the time. It seemed like they had quite a lot of plans for him.
Well, I think with Emma, they could have built her up to face Rhea Ripley at Elimination Chamber. I mean, Aussie versus Aussie, that would have just been a class main event, because Super Showdown when it was at Melbourne Cricket Ground, I mean, that show was amazing. Like, the Aussie crowd were really up for it. And when Buddy Murphy won the Cruiserweight title, like, it was just electric. I remember watching it thinking, this is class. Like, obviously the Melbourne Cricket Ground massive as well, so it was just really cool to see it in that kind of stadium. But yeah, I think they've really dropped the ball with this one. I agree with you on that one. They could have really done something with it, because obviously they must have known for a while it was going to Australia as well. It's not just like spur of the moment, oh yeah, we'll do it in Australia. Like, they must organise it like months in advance, because in February, isn't it? So.
But it's like you say, must be something about attention span. Like Peter was saying, like, so for example, like Elimination Chamber was in Montreal, and obviously Sami Zayn was massively over at that point. So they built the show around Sami. They go to Puerto Rico, and it's Bad Bunny, and it's Damian Priest, and it's Selena Vega. So again, you know, to varying degrees, they made a big deal out of those guys building up to the event. And then, again, you know, and it shows that they can kind of focus on more than one at a time. So obviously, yeah, you've got Rhea, absolutely. Grayson Waller. Is he? He's Australian, isn't he? Not. I was going to say I couldn't remember if it was Australia or New Zealand, but Grayson Waller.
You'll get in trouble.
I will. You know what it is? I work with someone from New Zealand as well, and she says to me, you don't mix it up, you know. Because you don't. But then also like you've got Rhea, and Grayson. Why not Emma as well? And kind of really built it up. And again, a match between the two of them in the stadium. Even if it was for Rhea to win, which is the likely scenario with how they're pushing it. Like I think that would have been really cool. So if we go, let's see. Let's go with Kev while we've been chatting. Is there anyone else that kind of stood out for you that we've maybe not talked about in these releases? And that's no disrespect to the others. I think we'll be here all night. I think if we talked about all of them. But is there anyone that stood out for you?
Mustafa Ali, I thought was a bit of a shock. Because they were really keen on him like a while ago. I know there was news they were going to push him for the world title, and that just went stale, and it just went off that idea. But he's an awesome wrestler. I've seen him wrestle live, and he's really good. And I think they've dropped the ball with that one as well. I think with a creative,
a very up and down career, isn't he? Yeah, he's had a very up and down career. I think, like you said, I mean, we joked about it a little bit last week, didn't we? When we were, I've forgotten even what the topic was at the time, but we were talking about the Money in the Bank ladder match and how he was booked to win that match. And then literally he's going through the curtain and they say, actually, it's going to be Brock Lesnar, who wasn't even in the match at that point. Do you know what I mean? He was unmasked as the leader
at that point.
he was unmasked as the leader of Retribution, who, for my money, and this is no slight on the talents involved, but all the gimmick, probably the worst WWE stable of all time. But then he's had these amazing matches. He's excellent in the ring. He was showing some kind of interesting stuff kind of when he was down in NXT there towards the end as well. So yeah, I was a little surprised to see his name come up as well, to be honest.
Another shocking thing with that is the fact that at No Mercy he was scheduled for a title match with Dominic. And I know Dragon Lee's got a match on Raw for the same title. So obviously they knew about it a few days before they released him, but it just made no sense. Why book him into a title match and then release him?
Yeah, it is. It's a bit strange. And I know, I mean, again, even thinking about his career, like there were times where he was openly like, "I want to leave," and they were like, "No." But it just seems that when they were starting to kind of get that giggle with him, I don't know, maybe it was, maybe in this occasion, maybe they'd said to him, how do you feel? Are you still wanting to go? Or I guess we don't know what happens behind the scenes, do we? But, I think, again, probably one of the more shocking names on the list. Do you think for Ali, again, particularly because of the kind of up and down career he's had, do we think there's a chance he'll kind of rear his head again in WWE? Or do you think it'll be potentially AEW, Impact, Independence?
I think he'll hit the Indies and he'll be amazing. And then WWE will beg him back. I think he'll get Matt Cardona. I think they'll realise what they've missed, what they've missed out on, and he'll reject them and go to AEW like he should have, like he should do.
I feel like that sound bite might be really telling in a few years. That's exactly what happened. So for you, Peter, again, obviously you kind of compiled the list for me as well of kind of all, because I was thinking, bloody hell, there's loads. Anyone that stands out for you that maybe we've not talked about from the releases?
Obviously, there's a couple of touched about, and I'll quickly before I go Kevin's sentiments, because Kev's is actually the one to talk about. But just a quick shout out for Dana Brooke. I think she got dealt a bit of a raw hand.
Yeah.
Brought up main roster far too early. Apparently, was a model employee, and it's a shame. And we'll see what happens with her. So I was kind of shocked about that, just from the amount of stuff she does from a company point of view. She's always had stuff with Titus O'Neil, and I thought at the very, a good company person to have around. So that one did actually take me by surprise. But the one that was hard for me to see was Mustafa Ali. I think he's incredible. I'm a big fan. Been singing his praises for years. I think I referenced in the notes he was 2018. He was doing these vignette, self-produced vignettes on Twitter, and he did the one leading up to, excuse me, his match with Cedric at WrestleMania. about the heart and soul. That was brilliant. And then the one he did for his match with Buddy Murphy about it was his eyes told me, and I was like, that's it. He's an incredible babyface. He shouldn't be anything but. He sells really well. It is a massive drop ball, and the only thing I can think of is he was getting pushed, he got injured, and Vince went, small, fragile, don't want it. To an extent, I think that's what was part of the problem with Ziggler as well, because after he won the World Heavyweight title, he got concussion from Swagger. And, and I think that was part of the thing as well. Small, fragile, not investing any more money in him to that level. And I think that's ultimately maybe is what tarred Ali's brush as well. He's not tough enough to hang it. I mean, can't help getting kicked in the head.
Yeah, exactly. This is what we were talking about earlier, isn't it? It's kind of right back to that stuff. And to touch on Dana Brooke as well, like, I totally agree with you there, because I think I remember, like, obviously back when NXT were doing the takeovers and this kind of stuff, and she really stood out to me as someone that I was like, I really liked the character and everything. And yeah, she was a bit, that's what NXT was. It was developmental, so there was room for that growth. For me, particularly talking about Emma as well, because I think she was at ringside for that match. It might have been Asuka's debut against Dana Brooke. If it wasn't a debut, it was early on in Asuka's kind of big streak that she had. And I'd stayed up to watch that takeover. And again, was just really impressed with kind of how she did and stuff. But I did think I feel like if she'd had a bit more time in NXT, a bit more time to kind of get sort of polished and stuff, I think she could have had a really, really good run. And I think it's a shame that they've kind of dropped her. But, as you've said, in terms of what the stuff she does for the company and stuff, wouldn't be surprised if she pops up again in the future. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
100%.
So that'll leave us with yourself, Robbie. Is there anyone else on that list that you kind of wanted to talk about?
Shelton Benjamin.
I was hoping someone would say Shelton.
We've all spoke about drop balls with different people. I think they massively dropped it with Shelton Benjamin. He could have easily been a main event player. And I think he was close in his first run.
Yeah.
I mean, they give him a victory over Triple H, which, normally that's them ready for the next step. And then he went away and he come back, and they just never really done anything until the Hurt Business, where you kind of saw again exactly what he could do. And then, as usual, groups break up, and one really only gets the push, and the other they just push to the side. But again, long time with the company over the two spells. I just think they could have done a bit more.
Mm. And I think for me, like, if we're talking about like memories of people, I've got loads of amazing memories of Shelton Benjamin. Like, I loved him when he kind of came in as Team Angle and World's Greatest Tag Team. Obviously, the super kick from Shawn Michaels gets replayed over and over and over again. Again, that was fantastic. Like, just even kind of Taboo Tuesday when he won the Intercontinental title. And I remember watching an interview with him about that, where he kind of said, well, the first thing that I knew I was going to win that match was when the referee counted the 3. Like, that blows my mind that, obviously, because again, the nature, for anyone who didn't watch it, like the nature of Taboo Tuesday was that the fans voted for who they wanted to be in that match. And I think there was like Batista was in there. There was some big names, and they went for Shelton Benjamin, and then he won the Intercontinental title. So some really nice moments from him. And I agree with you. I feel like they could have done loads with him, and his association with Brock, I feel like they could have played on that a lot more than they did. So yeah, real miss for Shelton. But I think wherever he goes, I think he could potentially become like a fantastic producer or agent. He still can still go in the ring, but if he is thinking of winding down, because again, he's been around for a long time, I think he would be an amazing agent or producer for AEW. Would be lucky to have him in that kind of capacity.
Yeah, definitely.
I actually heard someone online going through Reddit or Twitter or whatever, and someone pitching him he'd be a perfect fit for the BCC.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just putting Shelton in there and just going, I'm just going to
I might have read that too, actually.
Snot out of everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Like, have him come in and just beat Wheeler Yuta up and
But yeah, so it's a sad time. Obviously, again, we're talking about this stuff. Again, it's people who kind of lost their livelihoods and stuff. But, in the world of wrestling. I know that, certainly kind of the more experienced ones will certainly find stuff. The less experienced, hopefully it means that they'll get on the indies and, might find a way back or find success another way. So kind of best of luck to obviously to everyone, be their talent or otherwise, because I know a lot of people have lost their jobs in WWE in the last week, and that's never nice. As Peter says, if you have had that experience before, if you've been made redundant or unemployed, it's not a nice feeling. But one of the things that we touched on a little bit there was around Elimination Chamber. So Elimination Chamber, they've announced, again, about a couple of hours before the releases, it'll be coming from the Optus Stadium in Perth, Australia. Started to touch on it a little bit when we were talking about the releases. It's going to be Saturday, February the 24th. And obviously, usually Elimination Chamber is that last stop on the way to WrestleMania. I mean, Kev, you were saying, obviously, it was a Superstar Showdown was from Australia. Do you think it's a good move, kind of getting that hot Australian crowd as kind of the final... I still kind of say PLE, the final kind of big crowd before WrestleMania.
Yeah, almost definitely. If anything, for the Superstars, because I know that they get a really big buzz out of like a really hot crowd, like just wanting to watch wrestling, like, and I know when it really hypes up the Superstars. I don't know, like the jet lag flying to Australia and stuff, but I think having a pay-per-view outside the country, it just gives it a certain finesse, I think, and it just I don't know, and I just remember Super Showdown being really good, and because of the crowd, like they really made it, but like sort of similar to the crowds in England, where they're just different to the American crowds. They're just up for it more, I think.
Yeah,
and
I mean, it's not as if we're spoiled for pay-per-views over here, is it?
You know what it is, though, I think, and I've really liked this kind of over the last kind of year to 18 months, this idea of like, absolutely, you need some pay-per-views in America because it's your home base, but like, having one in the UK and having one in Australia, having one in Puerto Rico, like, and really kind of making them like big events, even, and obviously they've been to Montreal lots of times, but even kind of the last Elimination Chamber and kind of what a big event they made that and made it around Sammy and his opportunity and all of that stuff. Like, I think it's awesome. Like, I love that they're doing it. And then obviously that's kind of, I feel that probably spurred AEW a little bit for All In to be like, right, well, if they're going to do this, we're going to make a big splash when we get over there and we're going to do Wembley. So I think it's great that they're doing it. And again, visually, kind of these big shows just look absolutely phenomenal. I mean, obviously Emma will not be a part of it, sadly, but they've got big plans for Grayson Waller, and obviously Rhea Ripley is absolutely killing it. Do we think she'll still be women's champion by the time we roll round to Perth in Elimination Chamber, or do you think they might take it off her and have her win it back? Like, what kind of role do you see her playing in Elimination Chamber?
I think she'll still definitely be champion. I think the way they're pushing Rhea Ripley, she'll just be... she's injured. Apparently, though, I'm not sure, but apparently Nia Jax injured her. So,
shock.
Yeah. So maybe they might have to take the title off her until then for her to recover, and then she'll win it back in February. Or whether it's whether it was a work that she's been injured and she'll win it in her home country. But whichever, I think it'll be just awesome. I think the crowd will be like really up for it. I just wish I could go. If someone could put me up in Australia, that'd be awesome. I'll get the flight over.
Yeah, we need like a correspondent. We need a Mark side of the ring correspondent. So if anyone could put Kev up for Elimination Chamber, it would be an unpaid opportunity, but it would be greatly appreciated. So marksidepod@gmail.com, please. Let's get it done. Hey, but I mean, to be fair, we think obviously Rhea will play, hopefully will play a huge part in the show. Obviously, we talked about kind of Rock last week, and won't he be part of WrestleMania? It's Cody. Hopefully, he'll be kind of, really kind of building up that ascension. Roman Reigns possibly going to be there. Does anyone, again, if we're thinking we're that close to WrestleMania, are there any thoughts of what kind of matches might potentially be on the card? Any superstars we might potentially be seeing? Robbie, what do you reckon?
Well, I know rumoured Jimmy and Jay I think that's the reason why they've got them on both brands, to kind of keep them away from each other and build Jimmy up.
Yeah.
Don't really think they're doing a good job at that in a minute, because he just comes across as a bit of a twat. You've got
Not the point? Is that not the point, though?
It's a bit much in it. Where you've got Jay, who is living up to his name, main event. He's in the main event of these shows. Jimmy's not. He's just walking behind Solo Sikoa every week. I know that's a rumoured match anyway.
Yeah.
Whether it happens or not.
Yeah, I've heard that one too, yeah.
Do you think they'd wait for Mania for that, or do you think that might be something that they do in Australia?
It has to be Mania, because they've done an interview before Money in the Bank, and they said their dream match is WrestleMania against each other.
Yeah. They've said that for a long time, haven't they? So it'd be nice for them. And to be fair, I think it would be a hell of a match. It really would. And it makes sense to keep them apart, but hopefully, particularly once the new year rolls around, hopefully they can kind of build it up and kind of get things going. Are there any other particular
with the use of it? I'd love it if they got Rikishi involved as well. That'd be class. Like, having Rikishi is like in the middle, like obviously with his two sons fighting each other. I think it'd be really cool to get Rikishi back and have that kind of storyline in.
Well, every week I'm expecting Rikishi to turn up. I'm being honest.
My only issue, like, I think it's a great idea. They should do it. It's ridiculous they've not done it yet. But I could just imagine this really intense moment and then hearing Too Cool's music come on. And Rikishi coming down with the shades, all this. He can get them to dance as well. You know, that's what it needs to be. That's the ice. That's going to thaw the ice. Rikishi's going to come down. He's going to have the shades. Scotty Hottie can come back as well, because why not? Sorted. That's how you solve the problem. How do you solve a problem like the Usos? Rikishi. There you go. There you go. Triple H can have that one for free.
I still love the 2000 Royal Rumble when Rikishi eliminates the both, and then they just like what the hell, and then they just start dancing back to the locker room. It's just amazing.
I loved Too Cool. Underrated Attitude Era tag team. Too Cool, in my opinion. I thought they were awesome.
Was it one of them Jerry Lawler's kid, or was that just a vicious
rumor? Yeah, he was.
Yeah. No, he was, yeah.
Brian Lawler.
Wasn't he brought back through a feud with The Miz?
Yeah.
When he had a title shot against The Miz, I think that he brought him back then to get him involved. And then you had Michael Cole obviously yapping away.
I need to do better with my sarcasm in my voice because I know he's Jerry's kid. Sorry.
Jerry's kid.
I tell you what, though, I do remember. I know we're going off on a total tangent, but that's what I love about podcasts. Like, I remember them bringing him back for the Jerry Lawler Michael Cole feud, and it just totally fallen flat and just being a really uncomfortable watch. Which was kind of a sad last hurrah for Grandmaster Sexay, Brian Christopher. But Scotty Too Hotty, he was wrestling like in Newcastle recently. Like Scotty Too Hotty still, because he's a fireman, but he's also a wrestler, which feels like it should be a gimmick. But obviously he's doing the Scotty Too Hotty thing. So yeah, I remember seeing which WWE event it was. I think he teamed with Rikishi. It's when he had his run with Rikishi and they had tag team titles. I saw them live. So yeah, hopefully we should try and get Scotty on, shouldn't we? I might email Scotty Too Hotty. I'm going to ask him to come on.
Why not?
I'm going to do it. It's going to happen.
God loves a trier.
Yeah, exactly. So obviously there's the Mark Side of the Ring Facebook group, but what other people might not know is that we've got our own little private group called the Inner Circle, which, to be fair, it's not the best stable name of all time, but it's worked for the purpose of what we're doing. And what I'd said that I thought might be quite helpful was if the guys could message me kind of a wrestling hot take. Now, obviously, I'd like, if you're in the other Mark Side of the Ring group or you're listening to the show or anything like that and you want to send us your wrestling hot takes, I would really, really appreciate this. So, again, drop us an email to markside@gmail.com or post them in the group or anything like that. It might be better, thinking about it, might be better to email them to me because I would like people's gut reactions to these hot takes. Yeah. So that's why I asked you to message me them privately, because I felt, well, if we'll start discussing them if you know them. Yeah. So Peter and Robbie managed to send me one each. I'm going to let you choose, Kev, because obviously we'll do one today and I'm going to save one for later. So do you want to hear Peter's hot take or do you want to hear Robbie's hot take?
It's not Peter's. Sorry, Robbie. I just
Peter's.
doing that random. Yeah.
Go for it. So do you want me to read it out or are you happy to let us know what your hot take is, your hot wrestling take?
I will let the horse with the most read it out, and then I'll defend myself.
Go for it. All right, then. So, unpopular opinion. Hangman Page and Kenny Omega are dragged down by their association with the Young Bucks. So there we go. What's the initial reaction to that? Like, no one seems to have like a hard disagree on that. That seems to be some thought, considered thought there.
I get it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because through the majority of his AEW run, he's been a singles competitor. Page, same as Omega. I mean, I know they put them together at the beginning, where the Bucks, you can't have one without the other, unfortunately. Where Hangman Page and Omega on their own can put on brilliant matches. So I kind of get it.
I think the Bucks need Omega more.
What's your gut reaction?
I think the Bucks need Omega more than he needs them. Definitely. Mm-hmm. He's the best in the world. He's like the best wrestler in the world. Like, the stuff he's done, and like, he doesn't even need WWE. Like, he's rejected WWE so many times because they like WWE need him as well, and he's just said no chance. Like, yeah. So
he is kind of that elusive for WWE. He's that elusive one, isn't he? That it's like, they've tried so many times, but just
wasn't he close before they launched AEW?
I think so.
And I think at the last minute he said no.
Well, I think what they've done is they offered them a deal and then went, if you don't like it after 6 months, you can walk. That's how desperate they were to kind of stick it to AEW. Let's not be wrong about it, but I'll give some context for the take as well.
Yeah, go for it.
As I said to Mike, I'm like 50% into it, but for the reasons the other 50% is I want to see how much I can get my best friend to bite on it. But I think the thing is, and I like the Young Bucks. I'm not their biggest fan, but I do like them. I don't think we've seen Kenny Omega at his, what people would say, his New Japan best, in what he really can do. And we've seen how good Hangman can be. And I just think sometimes when the elite's together, it gets just a little bit too goofy. And I get it, there's a place for it, but I just feel we don't get the full benefit of Kenny Omega doing what he is really capable of doing. And I think the same with a little bit of Hangman. These are two guys who are so good. Like, keep them away from the goofy shit. And I just think we've not seen them realise the full what they really are capable of because of this the elite faction, and I think to an extent it harms the Bucks a little bit as well. I think give them it's the Young Bucks and not part of the elite. They go out and do their thing, but we've seen this elite saga for all 4 years now. In that terms, it just needs a break as well. So that's kind of where it stems from. It's not from a point of kind of any hate or not liking anybody. I just think after 4 years now, I think it's time for them to go and do the things that can always be that connection. It's always them. You don't have to forget about that. The others exist or whatever. But I think let's just take this elite saga away. And maybe he's starting to do that a little bit now. Well, not because I've just run the Ring of Honor 6-man show, but not. But maybe Kenny. Maybe Kenny.
But
well, he is kind of going off on his own, Kenny. I know he's just jumped into another tag match, but it's a tag match that I'm quite looking forward to.
Yeah, it's a tag match, but it's still kind of, it's still feeling like he has his own agency about it. It's not kind of tied to the elite saga. I think is in the elite law, which I think is a refreshing change. And obviously, he does have history with Don Callis, and obviously the recent stuff with Takeshita and Ospreay, obviously, which was announced. So it's that bit I really am enjoying.
Yeah, and obviously, if anyone who's kind of tunes in for episode 3, we'll have a breakdown of Wrestle Dream, and we'll kind of go through all the matches and kind of see what we're looking forward to, who we think is going to win, all that kind of stuff. But no, I think I do agree with your hot take. To be honest, I think so. For me, Kenny Omega was one of those people that like everybody talked about. Oh, he's amazing, this, that, and the other. And then when I started watching AEW, I think it took me a while to catch on. Like I could see he was great in the ring, but for me, I'm very much about the full package and this, that, and the other. But he's, quite frankly, I feel like when he is out on his own, so the match he had with Ospreay this year at Forbidden Door is one of my matches of the year, like undoubtedly. And, you know, again, seeing him live at All In made me kind of get him a bit more as well. I know he gets a lot of hate online from people who maybe don't particularly like his style of wrestling and stuff, but I think when he's kind of pushed as this kind of one of the best in the world, you know, this kind of single star, you know, this feud he has going on with Callis and the match that he's having at Wrestle Dream, the 6-man, I think is going to be really awesome. And Hangman Page, I feel like in some ways has almost been like the main character of AEW for a long time. Like I think his journey and his ascension, I think, has been a really good story for someone like I work in mental health, and kind of the story they've told about like Hangman's mental health and his anxiety and all this stuff, particularly when he was building up to winning the title. Like that's quite a bold story for wrestling. Like it's not really something that we talk about wrestlers being anxious. Like I feel like in WWE that could have been like a gimmick where someone gets panicky and can't win the match, and it would be played as a joke. And like I really appreciate that they told that story the way that they told it. And they're kind of starting to allude to it a little bit now with Swerve as well, I think, in terms of him saying, you know, the feud that they're having. Whereas with the Bucks, again, I think their matches are fantastic, but sometimes when you put them all together and they're coming out dressed as Ghostbusters or basketball players or something like that, it just dilutes it a little bit. Again, totally placed for it. I love me comedy and wrestling, but sometimes if you're in the middle of an intense feud, you don't want to be coming out dressed as Ghostbusters. Like, so it's that kind of thing. So I totally get where you're coming from. Absolutely.
That's to say, the Ghostbusters thing, I get it. Like, as heels, get it, because you want them, not like stupid, but like the cocksure themselves, so they're not going to take it seriously because they think as a group no one's going to touch them, especially when, you know, it was Gallows and Anderson, everybody that seemed to kind of come in as well. So, and you mentioned about the Hangman thing as well, and saying like the goofy, silly stuff, and people would say, well, that's Dark Order, and I was like, yeah, they are, but the story they told about Hangman within the Dark Order, while there was goofiness, the story itself was about him learning to kind of like love himself and learn that there was like friendship again, like learn to trust people again. And you get no more proof of that, how that connected. That while there was silliness and goofiness, the underlying thread was that story of friendship and learn to believe yourself again and trust people again, which everyone's going to connect to. And the response they got, again, it was when Daly came out as the Space Jam stuff, but before that they did that What is a Cowboy? And that segment, that little vignette leading up to that with the lights and all coming out, and then Hangman comes out, that pop was amazing. And so, you know, that's away from, it's not away from the Elite, but he was his own agency in terms, it was about him, not him as part of that. So.
Yeah. But before we move on, this is something that's popped into my head. So, like, I don't. Obviously, they have their video, kind of like their YouTube channel and all this kind of stuff. And like that's been going on for years and years. You know, that they've been doing this. And there's loads of kind of inside jokes and comedy in that. I've watched bits of it, but I've certainly never watched it religiously. Do you think that maybe some of the way that they come across on TV and kind of that, all of that, do you think that's kind of playing to that audience that kind of that is watching their channel every week and kind of getting caught up with everything?
Yeah, I think so. And you can't knock them for that.
No.
But I think it's, if you think of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, up until about 4 years ago, you could kind of drop in at any point and kind of have a gist of what's going on. Now you've got all this extra other stuff to watch. It's TV. And to the point where my kids are going, can I watch this? I was like, you're not going to understand any of this because you haven't seen that.
Yeah.
And I think part of the BTE thing is like, you don't have to watch it, but I think they're relying too much on these things, or when they're talking about like storyline beats, it's like, when this thing of like BT is like, you cannot use a YouTube show is part of what you're telling on TV to an extent. It's not, and I think that's where maybe some of the times the disconnect comes, because it's like, well, I only watch the TV. I don't have time to watch BT or watch BT, and if they're referencing something from 4 or 5 years ago, there's an episode a week.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot to troll through. So do it. But I mean, it's entertaining as hell. It's funny. There's no two ways about that. But
yeah.
I've watched some, but even I couldn't tell you what all the elite lore is.
Mm.
So
we'll move on to our kind of topic to wind things up, which was a great idea, because I think we were worried that this, and I don't think we needed to worry, but I think we were concerned this episode would be a bit of a downer with kind of talking about the releases and all that kind of stuff. So we thought to flip it on its head, we'd talk about kind of our all-time favourite returns. So great idea from yourself, Peter. Really appreciate it. And obviously I've got a few here, some that have come up in the Mark Side of the Ring chat, some that haven't. But again, there's nothing quite like a good wrestling return. We talk about big pops and stuff. Very rarely do you get a bigger pop than someone returning from injury or returning from exodus from the company, or maybe even coming debuting for a new company when we thought that maybe we weren't going to see them wrestle again. So lots of different ways that we could kind of interpret a return. Obviously, we'll talk about some of the ones that have been talked about in the group shortly, the most popular ones. But let's start with you, Kev. What would you say is kind of your kind of, when we talk about wrestling returns, what would you say is kind of your favourite or up there as some of your favourites?
So one of my favourite was, like, in hindsight now, it was awful, but as a kid I was so stoked with the Ultimate Warrior's WrestleMania 12 return, when he no-sold the pedigree to Triple H. Like, the match lasted like 10 seconds, but it was like, I remember I was like 12-year-old, and we had no like internet or dirt sheets or anything, and it was just like Vince McMahon saying, like, "Look, Warrior's coming back," but there was no hype of like what he looked like or what he was doing before. So it was basically, when he ran through the curtain, you hadn't seen him since, I think it was WrestleMania 8. So it was amazing to see him again, and I was a proper like Warrior fan. But again, that WWF one was absolutely disastrous. Well, for the 10 seconds he returned, that was like magical. But looking back at it now, it was terrible.
I think obviously I'll share a few of mine as we go on. Oh, sorry, go for it.
No, I was going to say as well, I mean,
yeah, I think
when... Sorry, we're having some lagging here. I mean, when Jake the Snake come back as well, for that Raw, and I think that was really good, considering retrospectively like what he went through with DDP to get himself to the point where he could be back in the WWE. I think that was amazing to see him come back and be welcomed into WWE. And when he put Snake on Dean Ambrose at the time, I just think it was really cool how like CM Punk and everyone like knelt down so he was the only person on camera, and that it was just a really, really nice touch that he was back. He got back in the ring and that. So they're definitely my two.
And I know when you there's a picture of like of that for Jake the Snake's return, where the snake's on Ambrose and he can't contain his happiness at all. Like, he's got this massive smile on his face. Like, he's just like, this is the best thing ever. Like, this is why I became a wrestler. So Jake the Snake could drop a snake on us, which is awesome. I think talking about kind of more, I guess, emotional returns and stuff. Like, obviously, and I think I said this last week, one of my favourite women's wrestlers, well, probably is my favourite women's wrestler of all time, is Saraya, aka Paige. And I think that, I think for me, if I think like, I remember watching the Fighting With My Family documentary before I'd even seen her in NXT, really enjoying that, thinking like, oh, I hope she does well. And then seeing her in NXT, seeing that journey, seeing their career in WWE, but also the bad stuff as well, kind of the tough times that she'd had with like injuries and, stuff outside of the ring and all this kind of stuff. And, she did return to WWE, but it was always this kind of like false dawn, because obviously then there was the injury that ended her career. And, they kept her on TV for a while, which was nice. but then eventually I think they just got a bit bored with her and she sort of faded away. So for me, when she turned up in AEW, which I guess for me is a return, I guess you could call it a debut as well, and she kind of walked into Arthur Ashe Stadium, because I think it's kind of been it's been pretty much a year at this point, I think. It was a big moment. I thought it was really nice, because it was this acknowledgement of like, she's been through a lot of shit, she's had a really tough time, and there was just something, I don't know, I just thought there's no way Tony Khan has signed her unless he's happy that she's going to be cleared and she's going to wrestle. So then that for me, should, similar to, to Edge, obviously I'm sure we're going to talk about Edge and Amazing Return shortly, similar to, Bryan Danielson, like, I feel like it was nice that, that she was able to, I mean, she's only 31, she's younger than me, and she was able to come back and kind of pick up her career again, lucky enough to see her win the title at All In. So that return at Arthur Ashe Stadium, I think for me, like I was over the moon to see her. So that's a more recent one I'd put in there, but I'll share some of the more classic ones as we go on.
Mind you, I did cringe when Toni Storm put her neck on the turnbuckle. Like that match, I was like, oh, I was like, God, because of that neck injury she had, I couldn't.
Yeah, I sat through the first match with Britt Baker at I think it was Full Gear, and I really liked both of them. And like, I could barely watch it because I thought like, and it's stupid because I thought, of course, they'll have put her through all these kind of rigorous tests. She's been cleared, this, that, and the other. But I just thought, what if something happens? What if something happens? And then when that match was over, I was fine. I was like, right, that's fine. She can go now. Like, but I was just like, oh man, I hope something doesn't happen. Do you know what I mean? But and I think that's it. When you've got your favorite wrestlers and you follow them on that journey and stuff, like, I'm just as much a fan of what she's done in the ring in terms of like the journey she's been on in her life and the adversity she's overcome. So that's certainly the most recent one for me, I'd say. How about you, Peter? Like, what jumped to mind for you in terms of big returns?
Obviously, there's the ones that we put in the chat, the kind of no ones, but I think when I think about the one I love the most and the probably one I've watched the most is Edge in 2020. And for people, and I've always been an Edge fan, but I wasn't like he wasn't my guy kind of thing, type of thing. But I'd still like him. If he wasn't my number one, he's maybe number 2 or 3. And the one thing I'll take away from that entrance when he comes back through is he runs out, music hits, and he's run out and he runs backwards and forwards across the stage. And then the moment hits him, and then he's the Rated R superstar. And the way I see that is when he's running through, and he's all that's in his new. It's 3 versions. It's the kid that was at the seats at WrestleMania 6. Is when that first music hits, and that's him running. When he comes through the smoke and you see the emotion on his face and he gets overwhelmed, that's Adam Copeland. And then when he gets it together and the hands go up and the pyro goes off, and that's Edge. And that's kind of, it might not be, but that's kind of how it seemed to be. It was like that adrenaline, the kid coming through, I'm coming through the curtain for the first time. And then it hits him, I'm back. And it's the man. And then it's the star. And that for the fact that it was totally unexpected. And knowing in the pop, it's easily my favourite. as a genuine return. There's others, quote unquote, storyline returns that I will mention in a bit, but as a pure out and out return, is my favourite. Totally.
I think for me, it's that moment where he comes through the smoke, and it's almost like he's woken up from like a dream. Do you know what I mean? And he's just like, I'm living this again, and I didn't think I'd get to, and none of us thought he would get to. And I mean, it's unbelievable moment. And like, I mean, I really like Edge. I'm a huge fan, but he's like, my wife loves Edge, like in more ways than one. Like, she loves him. So again, watching the Royal Rumble with her and seeing Edge come out, it was like, I mean, after like 9 years or something. Like, we talk about Saraya and Bryan Danielson stuff, but Edge, it was a long time. Like, I think we were all just pretty much like, Edge's career, it was fantastic, it was great. So to see him enter the Rumble and to have this kind of, obviously we don't know, is he AEW next? Possibly, that seems to be the rumor. But that kind of nice little WWE run that we never thought we'd have, which is really nice. I mean, Okay, I guess that leaves you, Robbie, in terms of great returns. What other ones kind of jump to mind for you?
I was going to pick Edge, but obviously everything Peter said I agree with. But on the list got Triple H's return.
Yeah.
Because back then there were no dirt sheets, so you didn't know. And then when his music hit, and the crowd went mental, and it was just like that. I always remember because of his jacket, the like denim gilet. Yeah. And it was just we needed him back at that point, I think.
Yeah, I think we did. And it's funny because when I started watching wrestling in 2000, and it's slightly cheating, but one of my return moments is related to when I started watching wrestling, and I think it's one of the reasons that I got so into it. But I hated Triple H. I hated him. Like, it was McMahon Helmsley regime. Like, he was a phenomenal heel. Like, hated him, like, with a passion. And then, obviously, the 2000 went by, 2001 went by, he got injured. And obviously, I realised, as I kind of learned more about wrestling and stuff, like, I kind of realised that I had this, actually, he's fucking awesome. Like, like, he's really good at what he does. So I was really excited to see him back. And I think, like you said, that time off and, obviously the invasion happened. I'm sure there'll probably be some time we'll talk about the invasion at some point. Like, it could have gone better, probably. So I think you're right. And it was that time where we needed Triple H to come back. And I mean, to be fair, like, yeah, like we're talking, 21 years ago? And I can still remember how vividly that pop and him coming out. And like you said, the denim on the leather and all this stuff. And then him declaring himself for the Rumble and all of that stuff. It was an awesome moment in Madison Square Garden as well. It's like the home of WWE. Yeah, hell of a moment.
I think that's the thing that makes one of those, that the pop, while people are so kind of fond of it or remember it more because it was Madison Square Garden. And you hear wrestlers say all the time, if you're over there, then that's over.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter necessarily about anywhere else. And it was a Raw.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was like a 90th minute winner type of Raw or whatever. It was that kind of you can't contain yourself but to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what makes it stand out as well.
So I'd say about my favourite, and again, this goes back to me kind of falling in love with wrestling, and it's slightly cheating, but I hope that you'll get what I mean by this, so this is, again, during the Triple H feud with Mick Foley, which for me is still one of my favourite feuds of all time. The street fight at Madison Square Garden is probably my favourite match of all time, like even now, all these years later, just the drama of it and everything. And one of my favourite returns, even though it's slightly cheating, is the return of Cactus Jack. So for me, still one of the greatest promos in wrestling history when Mankind comes out on SmackDown and he's saying, look, I'm not ready to face you in a street fight in the Royal Rumble, but I've got a replacement. I think you know the guy, ripping the mask off, ripping the shirt off. His name's Cactus Jack. And, like, that shouldn't work. It's like, he's just taking his mask and his shirt off. But Triple H sells it like he's seen a ghost.
I was going to say the look on Triple H's face really helped. Because at that point, I'd never even heard of Cactus Jack.
Yeah.
So I was completely lost.
Well, neither did I.
And then obviously...
Yeah.
And then the Triple H selling it.
So it's this mythical character. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's just by taking his tie and shirt and a mask off, and he's a different guy.
But it actually works quite well because in '97, Triple H was feuding with Mankind again, and there's the video on the Tron where Hunter's watching, and it's Mankind talking to Dude Love, and then it's like Cactus Jack is back. So there's not only is a Cactus Jack come back, but there's actual. Can you believe this? Some long term. It actually makes long term sense to what it had in the past, which and yes, that does count as a return.
Yeah, and I think around the same time, so I think it was after, because I'm sure Cactus was involved in the match. It was when it was the big feud, obviously the McMahon Helmsley regime, and it was like The Rock and Cactus and Too Cool and the Acolytes, and there was this massive tag team brawl at the end of Raw, and then the lights went out, and Kane returned. And I think for me, that's probably one that doesn't get talked about enough because the pop for Kane, Paul Bearer was there. There might be some people that are listening going, I don't remember that. Like, check it out, Kane's return. Early, we're talking January 2000, before the Rumble, before that street fight. Absolutely worth checking out just for the again, the whole thing where Kane just goes and destroys everyone, but just the pop that Kane gets for that return. And I mean, WWF as it was at the time, arguably was never hotter than 2000. Like, it was on an absolute tear. So again, 2 for me, kind of within the space of a few weeks. Fantastic returns. Unbelievable.
I think another one similar to the Cactus Jack reveal or return for the Triple H feud is the return of the old Stone Cold for that one night when you get a pop when the glass smashes anyway. It's a cheat code, but from what we'd seen, and there was that sense of urgency, but that kind of felt like a return as well, even though it's not. But it was a return to that character that part of the character that everyone had fell in love with. So I think that kind of falls into it, certainly in the Jason, but it counts. I'm classing as a return. That counts.
Yeah,
and I think it is up there for me.
That was probably the peak of the Invasion as well, I'd say.
Yeah, went downhill quick, didn't it?
Yeah, Stone Cold return for me is up there as well. When he the night Mankind won the title, because Stone Cold had been out for a little while, and then the glass pops and Stone Cold. I mean, Stone Cold was injured, so it basically comes down with a chair, like clocks the Rock, and puts Mankind on him. Like that pop that Stone Cold got that night was just, I've not seen anything like it. Like the whole,
I think there could be a pod. Sorry, it's just a lag, mate. Sorry, it's my fault.
Yeah, I think when the
I've got one more.
Mm-hmm.
Undertaker, when he came back as the American Badass.
So we're talking 2000 again.
Mm.
Yeah.
It was one of the Rock's matches, wasn't it? And then his music hit, and then comes out on the motorbike and takes out near enough everybody.
Yeah,
yes,
no, that was again awesome one, because they've been playing the vignettes, hadn't they, of like the little kids and all that. So you were thinking,
always
like,
creeped me out. The little girls creeped me out.
Because we were thinking, you got the possibility it was Undertaker, but again, like, I certainly wasn't online and stuff at the time. Like, I had no way of knowing. Like, I was like, who could this be? But yeah, no, absolutely. I think 2000, late 99, 2000 seems to be this kind of peak time for wrestling returns. There was one on the group that I said I would mention, and it's because I'd thought of it too, and I was really pleased that someone else had mentioned it, which was kind of Funhouse Bray and kind of the birth of the Fiend. So, that Bray Wyatt had taken that time off TV. I think he'd just been doing the stuff with Matt Hardy, so I think things had got a little bit lost. For me, my favourite version of Bray Wyatt's always going to be kind of leader of the Wyatt family and all of that stuff. But it was just so intriguing to see him do this kind of Funhouse thing where you're like, what's this? But enough that I felt like this is going to hold my attention. This is weird enough that I'm going to, and I've got trust enough in Bray Wyatt that I'm gonna give this a chance. Do you know what I mean? And then obviously, like, with the Fiend coming in and all of that kind of stuff, I thought that was really cool. Even kind of when he appeared, I can't remember if it was Mick Foley first or Finn Balor, but he would kind of appear as the Fiend and attack people on Raw, building up to Finn's match at SummerSlam. So I thought that was a really, really cool return. Similarly, last year when they were doing the QR code stuff, I thought that was really clever as well. But if I was picking one, I'd go Funhouse Bray.
Yeah, it was really good. There's a couple of things on that little run-up break. One, the first vignette when it was Mercy the Buzzard coming out the box. Did that freak anybody else out, or was it just me?
Oh yeah.
Because I remember watching that on the TV. I was like, I watch TV before I go to bed. I'm in bed, all the lights are off, and that bird pops up. I'm like, nope. Sorry, I'll admit it. At home, that freaked the shit out of me. Not going to lie. But the finish of that match I remember watching it, and Bray did a finish. It wasn't these mandible claw, but he did something where he motioned like he snapped Finn's neck. But it could be a mandible, but Finn was like sat on the mat, and Bray kind of had his head. The thing they'd see they do in the movies where they just kind of gone. And he did something like that, and that was the finish. And I'm watching that going, woohoo. I think you might have to change that. Because I know we say don't try this at home, but as we all found out, we've all wrestled a teddy bear. And some of us have got siblings that we've done stuff to do.
You've unlocked a core memory here, right? And it's nothing to do with what we're talking about. But I remembered, this was me kind of leaving school one day and walking home, and there being this buzz that these two kids had got into a fight, and it was because one of them had ran into the other kid's house, grabbed him, done a DDT, and ran out. Which I just thought was immense. It's totally unrelated, but just when you were talking about that, it just made me think of it.
What's a DDT account?
Yeah.
Did the other kids sell it though? Did the other kids sell it? Was this a 1990s DDT or was this 2000s DDT? Because the two are vastly different.
Yeah, it's going to be late 90s, so I reckon he probably sold it.
Yeah, it was good stuff.
I reckon he probably sold it. I mean, to be fair, before I reveal kind of the most popular return on the group, are there any other ones we want to kind of chuck in there for consideration?
I'd like to give at least AEW an honourable mention.
What was that again? Sorry.
An honourable mention for AEW because they've had a couple of nice ones.
Yeah.
Not going too in depth. I think you've got to give the CM Punk one a shout out to Rampage. It was brilliant. Perfect return segment, the lot. MJF coming back at All Out. Although the ladder match was a bit weird, the reveal was brilliant at the end. And as much as I give him a little bit of shit before, the Elite at Full Gear coming out to Kansas and Wayward Son.
Oh, that was cool. I love
and
that
it
song.
came out, I was like, those bastards have gone and done it. Which was my actual thing. I was like, those bastards have got us again.
Speaking of AEW, sorry, go on.
No, that's it.
Speaking of AEW, Billy Gunn, when he retired, and then he come back just before All Out, one of them.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that.
He said I ended up bringing a badass.
Yeah, badass
that
Billy Gunn.
Good.
So there's some surprising ones that we've got here on the list that actually no one voted for. So I'm going to read them first because I think they're in. And actually, we haven't talked about them. So that's quite interesting. The Rock's return in 2011. I'm surprised that didn't come up. But to be fair, I didn't think of it either. NWO's return at No Way Out 2002. I remember that feeling like a really big deal at the time, but it didn't really amount to much. Brock Lesnar returning on the Raw after Mania 2012. Kurt Angle returned to Raw after Mania 2017. Some of the ones, again, CM Punk's in there. He got a couple of votes. John Cena returned at the Royal Rumble, got some votes. MJF returned at All Out. Hardy Boys, WrestleMania 33. That's a good one also. But I'd say, looking at this here, is this a dead heat or is there... Oh, no. It's by one vote. So second is Edge return at the Royal Rumble 2020, but the one that's won was Triple H return at Madison Square Garden in 2002. So there you go. So that's who there's
a lot of people after a job.
But yeah, so that's who the group members of Mark's Side of the Ring have voted as their favourite return, which is a nicer way to end things than, kind of talking about the releases. Hopefully we might see some cool returns from some of the, be it WWE, be it somewhere else. Hopefully we'll see some cool returns for the likes of Dolph Ziggler and the like. So yeah. And I mean, thank you all very much for coming, as always. And, obviously we'll have another episode later this week where we'll break down AEW Wrestle Dream and we'll get kind of all of that going. Is there anything else that you want to check out with before we finish today?
Yeah, recommended TNA match for me to watch.
Any X Division with the bands along the top, any of them.
Ultimate X. Yeah,
a ladder match without a ladder, essentially.
Okay. I'll watch it.
Ken came up with a really good idea, actually, because so we were talking about Impact and stuff a few days ago, for anyone who wasn't, who didn't hear it. And Kev was saying, I didn't watch much TNA. I feel like I need, homework. So this is what you've done, isn't it? You've jumped in to get homework. So basically, we're going to need to recommend the good and the bad, I think, of TNA / Impact. Let's see what... I'm gonna have a look at Ultimate X matches before we go here, and I'm gonna let's say what we've got. I'm trying to think of the classic ones.
Was the one where with Alex Skipper. Was that an Ultimate X match?
I think that was a cage match.
Oh yeah, it was but they still had to have the. Oh, I don't know. I can't remember that one, but I think that one's just for that spot alone. Because I couldn't remember if it was an Ultimate X because obviously I can't remember how the framework worked. Whether they just had the cables on posts over the ring, or whether there was still there was like a cage structure to kind of climb up to get to the X. I can't remember. Again, not watching a lot of it.
Well, Ultimate X7 has AJ Styles and Christopher Daniels in, so you cannot go wrong there.
Right.
I'm just looking for a list of the matches, but the internet. Here we go. So there's the ones of the weekly pay-per-views, which I think are not bad. I think really it starts like when the pay-per-views start, like kind of it's a final resolution. There's Chris Sabin, Petey Williams, and AJ Styles. I'm sure that's pretty good. Christopher Daniels, AJ Styles, Alex Skipper, and Ron Killens. That's number 7. God, they did a lot of Ultimate X matches, didn't they? they used that stipulation a lot.
It was kind of their thing, wasn't it? Their gimmick. You only see it there.
Yeah. But I would say any of them, yeah. And I think we'll check in how you found it next time. I think that's a good shout.
I did watch the 5-star match with Samoa Joe and AJ Styles, and I really enjoyed it. And there's no complaints from me. It was masterclass in wrestling. It really was.
I'm gonna dig into what's it like who was the AJ Styles was supposed to have had an affair with or something at one point? Claire
Lynch.
Yeah, with
AJ Styles, Chris Daniel, and Dixie Carter was involved in it somehow.
Yeah. We'll find some proper deep cuts.
Yeah, I would say it wasn't long before he left TNA.
Mm-hmm.
He was right after
before
he left. Yeah.
Claire Lynch, I feel like she was called.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that was her name. But anyway, we've got on a massive tangent here. Thank you very much for joining us for another episode of Mark's Side of the Ring. Like I say, we'll be back sometime in the week to cover Wrestle Dream, bit of a preview, and I'm sure the wrestling world will kind of spew out something else for us to talk about. So until then, I've been Mike Norris. We've got Peter, Robbie, and Kev as